So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Avatar? So let's start the series. In the Konoha cemetery, the young child was looking gravely at the two headstones. His younger sister looked at him from behind while holding the older third Hokage's hand. Neither child spoke, having kept this little space as a sort of hallowed place. They remained silent here. It was regarded as taboo. The old man looked at the two children with sadness. The boy had obtained his certificate from the academy earlier that day. Similar to artists like Itachi Uchiha and Kakashi Hatake. While those two had mostly been the product of natural talent, this child had pushed himself to that extent to secure the rights that all shinobi of Konoha had. He was now an adult and the legal caretaker for his younger sister. He had prepared a little house for them both to move into this evening. Once the redhead's duties were completed. When Hiruzen felt the 3-year-old girl holding his hand tremble from the chilly morning air, he attracted the attention of the young child in front of him by softly clearing his throat. "Oh, sorry." Naruto whispered softly and held out his hand to the young blonde girl. "Come on, Kasumi. We need to finish packing our things at the orphanage," Naruto replied, taking hold of her hand. The old man groaned and followed the children. He was happy that the community was better than many others and that no one was willing to abuse the children. If their parentage had been a mystery, he wondered, would it still be the case? In any event, although neither child was abused or neglected, their seclusion from the other orphans and the staff because of their innate fear of the seal on Kasumi had begun to have a detrimental effect on them. It wasn't exactly a solution to let them have their own new home, but as Naruto had said to Hiruzen a few weeks before, living alone yourself was far worse than being with others. The ancient Hokage merely hoped that the tension would have lessened and that young Kasumi would be able to live as normal a childhood as possible when she joined the academy, unlike her older brother. Naruto was not a genin for very long. Very short. The money a genin made was almost nothing compared to the other ranks, so a little over a year after graduating from the academy, he forced himself into the chunin position. For an adult, juggling his training, his work, and looking after his sister would have been challenging. At such a young age, it seemed impossible. But Hiruzen didn't ignore the children, and as Kasumi matured, as Hiruzen had anticipated, her load-related anxiety began to lessen. When the girl befriended Hinata Hyuga, who greeted her whenever Naruto was on missions, things significantly improved. Both Naruto and Hiruzen were moved by Kasumi's happiness at having a buddy. It was the result of Kasumi's efforts to stop some bullies from taunting the heiress, and Hiruzen had taken some pleasure in that. The Uzumaki children were like family to their father, just as he had been before his passing. He could not imagine either of them disappointing him. But when Naruto discovered that Kasumi was being bullied by the same older children, he had to intervene. Seeing an elder brother's protectiveness became far less amusing when he was a natural-born shinobi. Naruto advanced through the ranks and finally found himself directing missions as a Takujo and an ANBU member before the majority ever passed their first chunin exams. His natural ability to use large, dense chakra and his downright cruel mind made him an invaluable member of his team, joining other prodigies Itachi Uchiha, Yuga Uzuki, and Tenzo. All under the guidance of the living legend Kakashi Hatake. Their crew became well known, despite the fact that they were all supposedly anonymous behind their masks. The fact that the Kitty Squad, as some derogatorily referred to them, were all children was difficult to hide. Despite this, their mission record was perfect. Only triumphs, no losses. They had minimal trouble carrying out assassinations and bodyguard duties. Even the elimination of many outlaws throughout the country and the rescue of Princess Koyuki Kazahana. When Itachi slaughtered all of his clan members save for his younger sister Setsuna, of course, everything was different. The group drifted apart. Kakashi turned others away, and Tenzo took on more and more solitary work. Yugo became friends with a fellow kenjutsu practitioner who taught her a lot, and they later became romantically involved. Not just anything with swords on them, either. On the other hand, Naruto requested to be transferred to the Hunter detachment. He was never able to capture his former teammate and friend and bring him to Konoha for trial. Instead, he hunted down a renegade who sided with the traitor Orochimaru. Despite never having met the villain in person, Naruto found one of the Snake Sanin's many bases. A laboratory housing the remains of other former Konoha shinobi as well as a living test subject named Enko Murarashi. The scene had a bit overwhelmed Naruto. Even if he had considered himself accustomed to the horrors of their world, a single visit to one of Orochimaru's playgrounds was enough to make him tremble horribly. Thankfully, saving Enko signaled the start of a new phase in his life. One that pulled him away from the cold-blooded ninja he was gradually turning into. Naruto dropped Kasumi off at the academy and headed to Anko's new residence in Konoha. She lived in a less upscale part of town, but it wasn't quite a bad neighborhood or anything. Shinobi who were temporarily unable to return to service for different reasons would be housed in less attractive quarters, which the Hokage could easily afford to pay for. The people who lived here were largely shinobi who had been injured on a mission or rendered incapable by the Kyuubi attack 8 years prior, but the bulk had enough money to never need to. In a technical sense, Anko was okay. Except for the cursed seal, the few experiments Orochimaru had conducted on her hadn't been as invasive as one might imagine. Then there was the invisible damage the Sannin had done to his former apprentice. The fact that the majority of the villagers and shinobi had viewed her in this way upon her return hadn't helped either. That added to Naruto's strong bond with the girl. He couldn't help but see his younger sister in Anko's shoes, despite the fact that she was older than he was. Despised for a completely uncontrollable reason. With a bang on the door, he shouted, "Anko, open up." The door opened and he saw the teenager in the bathrobe standing in front of him after hearing some rustling inside. Anko looked at the 11-year-old in front of her. Without his uniform, it was hard to see him as the shinobi who had recently departed the ANBU after being promoted to Jonin. He was the group's youngest member, yet he never attained the same degree of prominence as Itachi Uchiha. That boy may have joined ANBU later than Naruto, but he was a captain in the Black Ops Force before the incident that earned him an S-rank criminal designation in the bingo book. When she opened the door further and Naruto entered, Anko said, "Oh, it's you, Pipsqueak, I guess you can come in." He frowned at the messy living room as he followed her inside. He had to clean the small table in front of the couch of debris before he could put down the takeout he had brought her. "Bringing me food again? If I didn't know better, I would say you had a crush on me." She chuckled softly. Naruto smiled slightly at that. He could see the girl slowly coming out of the shell her trauma had left her in. She had started to regularly taunt and joke with him when he came to visit, even after a month of recovery, which was a big improvement, but she would always have some of the issues that her pain had left behind. "Are you sure you know better?" was his humorous response, and Anko laughed as she opened the takeout. "You are a weird kid, but I definitely like that. You're one of only like 4 people that bother visiting me outside of Inoichi and his clan members." Anko laughed. However, Naruto was able to see through the informal mask. The callousness of her allies affected her severely. Before she was taken by Orochimaru, she had resembled Naruto a lot. Hailed as an up-and-coming shinobi prodigy with a bright future. Although it was unlikely that she would be given the chance to fully reintegrate into their soldiers for some time, she was lucky to have obtained the Chunin tank before to her departure. She was ecstatic as she sat down to eat, saying, "Ah, you got my favorite again." Naruto flushed and moved aside, but she nearly gave him a free show. Anko herself flushed slightly as she tied her robe properly. She was very shameless normally. Although she was not treated with the same affection as she had in Konoha, at 16 she took pleasure in attracting attention to herself through her attractiveness. But the child was not only too young, but also one of the few people in Konoha she no longer felt really comfortable around. After being tricked into the worst experience of your life by the man you believed to be your foster father, you weren't exactly ready to be a reliable and healthy person. You know. It is weird when you just come over with food and sit silently while I eat. Why do you come over anyway? I mean that Takujo, Kurenai, that Lord Third assigned me, has started coming between meals just to visit or whatever, but you haven't been assigned to me or anything like that. Naruto turned slightly but remained facing Anko when she asked her question. She hadn't been his designated representative. It was true. The others that came to see her were not like him. Each of them came in an official capacity. Nearly since she had moved into her new home, Naruto had been seeing Kurenai, but because she and Anko got along so well, Kurenai had started to visit more often than was required. I dunno. I just felt like I should, I guess. It's not right the way people treat you like a traitor. You're not, him. Naruto said simply. A little, contented smile spread across Anko's lips as she gazed at the younger youngster. You are just a sweet kid, aren't you? She remarked, laughing. Don't tell anyone. It makes me look bad, the smiling toddler remarked. Oh, please. If they think you being a little sweet kid has anything to do with your ability as a shinobi, then they don't deserve their own headband. Anko grumbled. Naruto nodded in spite of her irate look before taking a small amount of the food for himself. She then grumbled, Hey! I bought it, plus, I outrank you. I have to make sure that it's okay for my pretty junior to eat, replied Naruto. As she responded, does the itty-bitty Jonin think I'm pretty? Do you actually have a crush on me? He flushed again and rushed to the door. Anko laughed as he turned to go. He wasn't ready to make fun of her just yet. But if he continued to be cute as he got older, perhaps she could actually enjoy making fun of him. Anyway, they had become close friends because of Naruto's care for her. Despite Kurenai and Anko's first professional deference, Naruto's genuine care for her well-being was evident right away. The room was full of arguments, and adults appeared content to act more childish than Naruto had ever seen. The third Hokage was a little taken aback by the reaction to his decision. It's breaking of tradition. Hayashi, won't you say something? One of the village elders questioned the man sitting directly to Naruto's left. That day was unique. To debate a plan to change the academy's curriculum, Hiruzen had called a meeting of the department and clan chiefs. Rumor had been that the academy had eased in the years after the Third Shinobi War, therefore most were expecting more challenging exams or courses. Instead, Hiruzen had declared his intention to raise the academy's graduation age to 16 and include D-rank missions in the curriculum. The Hokage felt strongly about the change, even though it was a big one. Nevertheless, it was important enough to invite the opinions of the many political figures in the hamlet. I support the Third's decision. More time spent training and honing our recruits, as well as getting them used to live as a shinobi, will only improve our forces in time. The room was stunned. However, Naruto felt that Hayashi wasn't fully articulating his position. In any event, The Hyuga had finished speaking and was clearly not interested in engaging in debate with the other individuals who had been summoned. 16, though? Isn't that a bit old for graduation? We need to rebuild our forces after the war in Kyubi still. Inoichi responded. Are you really saying you're ready for Ino to graduate in less than 2 years? The angry Choza asked his friend. It's been 10 years since the Kyubi attack. No, well. Shikaku. Inoichi stumbled out. We have been running wartime graduation ages since the first Shinobi War. I believe the original age was to be 14, stated Shikaku. According to Shibi, that could be more reasonable. Like most of the people in the room, Sum stepped back to the Hokage and stated, with all due respect, Lord Third, but why now? I mean, my Hana graduated at 12, and my Kiba would be fine doing the same. It's simple. My teachers were Lord First and Second themselves. Their reason for founding the village in the first place was in search of peace. They weren't so naive as to assume there would be no war, but their wish for children to grow up and be children before living the life of shinobi was their core desire in building our home. I made the mistake of shortening the graduation age to 12 during the First War in a bid to increase our manpower. It's shortened and shortened since then, with some of our children entering war as young as 5 or 6. Hiruzen spoke, and many individuals were staring as he continued. I have regretted my rash decision to shorten the graduation age ever since. If anything, I should have extended it like I wish to now. Numbers are not how we have won the wars we have fought. So many of our children have died needlessly, or should I remind you of our losses in the Third Shinobi War? Many of you lost friends and siblings before they had even entered puberty. The Hokage's mind was clear. However, Hiruzen had made it a habit to be open to the decisions made by his subordinates. He wanted to appear to be taking the opinions of the majority into consideration, at the very least. Hayashi Hyuga made the straightforward declaration, my position remains with Lord Third. The elders agreed, stating, the graduation ages have been perfectly fine in the past. The curriculum could be changed, though. Naruto? Hiruzen asked. In his head, he cursed the old man for putting him there. But it was easy to decide his position. I'm all for it. I graduated early. I've served Konoha in combat since I was 6. It was far too early to be seeing such things. We already removed early graduation when Itachi Uchiha snapped. This seems just as good of an idea as that was. Naruto replied. Koharu, clearly irritated that one of his village's geniuses would insist on spending extra time at the academy, asked Naruto directly, as you stated, you were an early graduate. What makes you think this is necessary? Because from the group that I graduated from, 3 other shinobi remain active. Out of nearly 20 graduates. I might have been half the age of the rest of my class when I got the headband, but don't you see the fact that you've been using children as fodder for over 50 years at this point? I mean, we haven't even been at war since the Kyubi attack. Our casualties among genin are completely avoidable. Naruto rants, surprising a majority of adults with his utterances. Hayashi Hyuga, on the other hand, endorsed Naruto personally, and it also won over several other individuals. After the discussion ended and Hiruzen put the new academy circumstances he had wanted into effect, the old man felt it was time to begin preparing his next successor. His first option for the role had been Itachi, but that ship had already set sail. But now, Naruto was the best person to take over as Hokage. At least he would arrive in time. Naruto removed the kunai silently from its holster. The bulk of their former team would have been back together for this task if Yugo had been present, but Naruto hadn't worked with Kakashi and Tenzo in a long time. What's G- was about to be said by a civilian man before a shuriken tore through his throat. The toss originated from the nearby drying linens. When his opponent used their chest to catch the blade, Naruto used his kunai in response, and he was pleased to see the red splatter on the fluttering sheets. Narushiri was a quaint little village near the edge of the land of rivers. But lately, it has been the focus of a gang of outlaw shinobi who led a large gang of bandits into the area. The local ruler was assassinated, and they used his stronghold as a center of operations. At least it had appeared that way. Only for the bandits, though. Actually, they had operated out of a small inn here in Narushiri. The innkeeper, a former kunoichi from Suna, had been running one of the continent's most profitable human trafficking networks alongside other missing nin from other towns across the continent. Unfortunately, before the Kakashi-led group could find out who was purchasing so many kidnapping victims from the rogues, they had already taken up residence. Narushiri was now a silent battlefield, with the shinobi on both sides chasing one another. As was common with most renegade ninjas, Naruto and his company were outnumbered, but it was clear that their training had degraded because they had left home. Slowly, the roles were being switched, and one by one, the missing ninja were being sought. Naruto heard birds singing 2 houses away, which meant Kakashi had found another enemy and removed them from the scene. Naruto gently removed another kunai from his own spot in this residence. The paper doors of the quaint tiny village and the closeness of the buildings made the battleground unique. Most of the wars he had fought in so far had been distant from civilization, in ruins, or in some type of embattled stronghold. Moreover, the people who lived in Narushiri had no idea what was going on. Some just stumbled across a corpse and screamed, only to be slain by the shaky renegade ninja. This exposed their location and made it possible for Naruto and his team to destroy them, but it still killed innocent people, which infuriated the Uzumaki more than he had expected. From a doorway close, a voice yelled, "Leaf." He kept searching for targets, but Naruto answered with the proper countersign, "Tree." Tenzo rushed over to Naruto's side and yelled, "Naruto." He asked, "What's the count?" to the older boy. "I think there's only 3 left." "Well, maybe less, depending on how many Kakashi just took down." "Kind of reminds me of the old days," said Naruto. Tenzo snorted. "You're 16. What old days?" "You know what I mean." "Yeah. Sure. Let's move to the east. I have a wood clone covering the bridge, but I feel like if there are any leftovers they will try and make a break for it, and the bridge is the fastest route toward the border." While still searching for targets, Naruto responded, "Sounds good. Lead the way, Tenzo." Silently, the 2 Konoha shinobi made their way through the village. They did their best to ignore the sobs of a mother who had found her dead child outside their front door. Even though cleanup would take some time, it was only fair that they help the people bury their loved ones after all of this mess was cleared up. "Yo!" A familiar voice yelled out to Tenzo and Naruto, who both blinked in surprise. Kakashi stood beside the bridge, beside the ruins of Tenzo's wood clone. At Kakashi's feet, there were obvious indications of an electric kunai passing through the 3 deceased missing nin. "Oh, was that the last of them?" said Naruto and Tenzo as they stood up and followed their superior. "Far as I could tell," was Kakashi's direct answer. Naruto nodded, turned one of the bodies over, and began rummaging through its pockets for something of value. "I already searched them. They didn't have anything useful. We should seal up the bodies, though. There might be something I missed for our research teams to find. Plus, we probably ought to help the villagers clean up." Kakashi continued. As if to emphasize his argument, there was a scream in the direction that Tenzo and Naruto had just gone. Naruto assumed the voice was that of the cute young washerwoman who hung the blankets to dry. But at least she wouldn't end up as her neighbor did. The Narushiri incident was mostly disregarded. At least until a month or two later, when Jiraiya showed up and demanded answers for what had happened. It didn't take a genius to figure out exactly who the buyer was for all those missing people. In the Hokage's office, Jiraiya said wearily, "You've all seen his labs. You know what was inside. I found one of his labs down the road from the village. It looked like a roadside shrine but had a hidden door." Naruto's chest burned as he saw the hollow look in his friend's eyes when he stared at Tenzo. Jiraiya stood there and said, "He's gone with no leads again. At this rate, Orochimaru will be on the run for the rest of his life." "Nothing? No new reports at all?" asked Hiruzen. "Sorry, Sensei, I have nothing for you this time. Clearly, I'm behind where I should be if it takes me a month to even find out Konoha hit one of Orochimaru's suppliers. Still, I want you to watch for anything. Orochimaru is our priority target," the Hokage said. "What about Itachi?" asked Naruto. "He's dangerous and powerful, but Orochimaru spreads death everywhere he goes. Itachi just seems to be trying to lay low." Jiraiya disagreed. Naruto exchanged glances with his colleagues. Naruto had actually seen the aftermath of Orochimaru, albeit they weren't particularly pleased. As terrible as the crimes committed by Itachi, the deaths Orochimaru had perpetrated were little compared to the horrors he endured. Hiruzen stated, "You're all dismissed." Thinking of his former student was exhausting. All the males went out. Kakashi disappeared in a small puff of smoke, as usual. Before departing over the rooftops, Tenzo waved to Naruto one more time. Naruto then began to move through the streets but stopped when he saw that someone else had joined him. "Lord Jiraiya," he asked. "What's with this Lord Jiraiya stuff, kid? I'm your godfather, remember? Don't you want to catch up or something?" Jiraiya replied. Naruto furrowed his brows in confusion at that. More than a decade ago, Jiraiya had come to catch up. The redhead had visited before and spoken openly with Naruto. He had recently lost his parents. They had only met once since, when Jiraiya was meeting with the Sandaime. Moreover, she had never even seen the man who was the godfather of both Kasumi and Naruto. Naruto hadn't even bothered to tell his sister about the man or their connection. What was the point, he thought, since she would never meet him in person? Jiraiya crossed his arms, making it obvious that the supposition had been incorrect. "You know, I really should meet Kasumi. She's what, like?" Jiraiya stopped off as Naruto simply stared at him. "She shares a birthday with the same day she and I were orphaned. The same day the village got wrecked, remember?" "Sure you do," murmured Naruto. "Right. Look, I know I should have been here, but Jiraiya repeated. "Stop. Whatever excuse it is, it doesn't matter. I won't forgive you for it, but I know my dad would at least want me to let you come to the house. Maybe meet Kasumi." Naruto sighed. Jiraiya gave a big smile at that. However, he stopped as Naruto held out a hand. "What?" he asked the adolescent. "3 conditions. Don't get her hopes up about you coming around to visit. We both know you won't. At least not for another 5 years or so. Secondly, I have someone staying with us. Don't pull that perv crap around them. They're off limits. I shouldn't have to say Kasumi is too, but I am anyway." Jiraiya responded, "Sheesh, kid, give me some credit. I'm not a pedophile. I don't care, Naruto glared back, just follow my conditions. Okay. Now, what's the third one? You have to tell me whatever way that my dad taught you the Rasengan. Kakashi has flat out refused to teach me what he knows about it, saying I have to learn it from you, and shockingly all my dad's notes on the technique seem to have disappeared from the Hokage vault at some point. Weird, since only the Hokage are keyed to the seal on the latch, except for you since you maintain it. Naruto replied. Hey, I wasn't trying to steal it away from you and your sister or anything. That vault just isn't as secure as it was when your dad was the one maintaining it. Jiraiya answered by offering a defense. I don't care, old man. Just make sure you have what you need. You aren't leaving the village until I have the technique down, Naruto said, turning and heading home. Now, wait a minute. It took me months to get that damn thing down. I can't hang around here for that long. Jiraiya responded. If it took you months, you won't be here that long after all, Naruto called over his shoulder. As he approached Naruto, the Sannin grumbled, You were so not like Minato. He was so nice and polite. When Jiraiya learned that the flat owned by the Uzumaki family was a decent home, she was a little surprised. It was one of the nicer buildings in the village and was clearly well maintained. By the second condition of his visit, he expected even more mayhem from a teenage boy and his younger sister, along with his girlfriend. Instead, the place was nearly spotless. Kasumi will be home from the academy soon and Naruto began to say to Jiraiya, but he stopped when Anko entered the room with a big smile and her head cocked to the side in response to Jiraiya's arrival. What's up with the toad? She asked bluntly, and Naruto smiled a little. Since he had brought Anko back to the hamlet, they had become closer over the years. She ultimately made it back to active duty, despite the fact that many others still regarded her with distrust. Thankfully, the department heads, especially the head of TNI, confirmed her commitment to Konoha. Or at least her loyalty to a few chosen Konoha locals. However, since her status had returned to active service, she was no longer qualified for the community-provided housing. She received a decent wage in her new position as a Takujo under Ribiki's supervision, but she was personally overcharged for whatever lease she was able to secure. The locals clearly didn't want her around, even if they didn't say so out loud. As friends do, Naruto allowed her to remain with him. Ultimately, his space was too big for only him and Kasumi. They had additional areas that could easily be turned into beds. Consequently, what began as a short-term circumstance quickly became a long-term one. It has also become a little more complicated in recent years. Jiraiya asked, somewhat surprised, Anko Madarashi is your guest? Sarutobi had informed him of the way the community in Orochimaru treated the girl. He had heard that several of the shinobi had stayed behind to make sure she was welcomed back into their group. But he didn't know Naruto had been one of them. Guest? She asked, turning to face Naruto. The statement from Naruto was straightforward, I didn't want to give him any ideas. Smart. Sorry, Gramps, but I'm taken. No peep show for you, she remarked, turning to face Jiraiya. Taken? Jiraiya said in a whisper before turning to look at his godson. Naruto virtually growled, remember what I told you, Jiraiya. She's off limits, and so is Kasumi. Anko's face was sour as he gazed at the Sannin. The man wilted at such a statement. Clearly, she was wrong about him. Wait, I'm not into little girls. I would much rather look at you. Well done, by the way, Naruto. Didn't realize you were into older girls, but you definitely know how to pick 'em. Jiraiya was staring at the redhead. Anko kissed Naruto and then walked to the kitchen to make tea. Naruto moaned, "This is going to be a long day." Soon after, Anko sat in the living room with Jiraiya and Naruto. While the elder man's questions regarding Naruto and Anko's relationship were a bit intrusive, Jiraiya and Naruto did manage to catch up over their tea conversation. "I have got to know. Did she pop your cherry on your birthday?" "Oh, did he pop yours?" Jiraiya asked the couple. Naruto snorted and spilt her cup, saying nonchalantly, "We're saving it for marriage actually." As she reached down to inspect the tea stain down her front, she groaned, "God damn it." While she went out to change, Jiraiya and Naruto sat in silence. For the most part, Anko had maintained the discussion by ridiculing the old guy and her companion. She was actually much better at conversing than either of them. For a brief moment, Naruto longed to mock the master spy. But before he could begin, Kasumi rushed through the front door of the apartment and said, "I'm home." Both Anko and Naruto shouted, "Welcome home." The blonde grinned as soon as she walked into the apartment and only stopped when she saw the man sitting in the living room next to her brother. After giving him a tense glance, she turned to Naruto, who shifted in the seat next to him to accommodate her. Rather, she gazed at the man before collapsing into him. "Kasumi, this is Jiraiya of the Sannin. He taught Dad, I guess," Naruto said in his brief introduction. "Really?" she questioned him. Anko returned to them and said, "It's kind of doubtful, honestly. Besides the toads, I don't think the fourth was known for anything that the old man taught him at all." The young woman stuck out her tongue at the girl sitting on her boyfriend's lap. Instead, she was beside him where Kasumi had not been. Clearly, they are as close as they can get. Jiraiya's joy at seeing Kasumi quickly diminished after hearing Anko's remarks. Jiraiya's point was, "That's not fair." With a shrug, Naruto remarked, "It's not wrong, though." It sounded more direct than she probably meant when she responded to him, "Oh, that's kind of lame then. What are you visiting for?" Actually, though, she was only curious as to why he was there. However, despite Kasumi's resemblance to their father, her manner was a bit too severe compared to Minato's always kind manner. Their upbringing had been greatly influenced by Naruto and, to a lesser extent, Anko. "I was close with your dad, you know. So I thought I would check up on you guys. Get to know you better. But, Mom and Dad died nearly 15 years ago." "I've never seen you in my life," Kasumi replied, a little coldly. Jiraiya exhaled deeply. It took a lot of work on his part to gain these children's favor again. Specifically, whether he planned to stay for however long it took to teach Naruto the Rasengan. Jiraiya had become used to a pupil outperforming him. Back in Rain Country in the later part of the Second War, his first students were far more talented than he had been at their age. Still, they had only been kids. Later, with Minato around, it was difficult to stay ahead of the child. He took in everything like a sponge and was too creative for his own good. The flying right gene of the second Hokage was pushed beyond than anyone could have imagined, and the legendary Rasengan was created. Even if he claimed it wasn't finished yet. And Jiraiya recognized that. Almost everyone believed that Minato was a one-time occurrence and a legend. All his son was a jerk. Not a weak at all. He claimed to already know the fundamentals of the jutsu and to have figured out the most of it by trying to redevelop it over time. That following Jiraiya's little training session, everything had all of a sudden come together. How could someone be so nice about that while being such a jerk? The Sannin had felt a little exploited when it was all done. A simple, tiny goodbye lunch was made for Naruto the night after he learned the talent one-handed. He watched the young redhead go now, holding his purple-haired fiancée in one arm and his sunny blonde sister in the other. He didn't even glance at his brief instructor as he made his way home. Without even a napkin, a servant handed him a small piece of crinkled, poorly folded paper and said, "Lord Jiraiya, please pardon me, but this note was left with the bill for you." Jiraiya scowled at the backs of the three individuals he had just served a costly, complimentary dinner to. "The handwriting is kind of girly, thanks for the jutsu and the meal, pervert. See you next time you're in town. We can do it again, I guess." Later, Naruto. The toad wise man sighed with sorrow. It would probably take some time, but he hoped to establish some kind of contact with the children of his students. However, he had to be going back to work right now. He had to break his relationship with his former best friend and make him answerable for all of his transgressions. The fact that he did so was both a personal concern and a way for him to protect Konoha. Regretfully, after all this time, he was still no closer to stopping him. She's going to be late. It's not her fault. She was too excited to sleep until almost 2 in the morning. She'll be finished getting ready soon enough. Gah, you sound like such a mom. The woman at the stove stumbled and landed on the countertop, then glared at her partner. The redhead was busy organizing his younger sister's things when Anko scowled at him and remarked, "That wasn't funny, Naruto." Naruto just smiled as she went back to making breakfast for everyone in the home. She had recently had a little pregnancy scare, so she overreacted. Now that they were certain she wouldn't truly undergo a life-altering metamorphosis, Naruto had determined it was acceptable to constantly harass her about it. She found that strange because she would have been carrying his child, and whether he wanted to or not, he would have been accountable. "She really is going to be late at this rate, though," Naruto said as he leaned into the hallway. "Kasumi, hurry up," he cried, and from the back of the house he heard a thump and a string of curses. Anko and Naruto both chuckled as the blonde adolescent entered the living room. At least she had on the mesh shirt Anko had forced her to wear, even if she was just dressed in her leggings and breast bindings. Her tangled blonde pigtails, which had become something of a signature style for her, stuck out a brush handle. Her words were blunt, "This is your doing." She pointed coldly at her older brother. With another frown, Naruto said, "Nope, if you had woken up when I told you to, this morning, you wouldn't be scrambling to get ready for class now. Hurry up, and put on a shirt." She disappeared back down the hallway toward her room. Naruto turned to face his sweetheart and saw that she was trying to suppress her laughter, which caused her shoulders to tremble a little. Although Kasumi was normally on time and unusually neat, the woman couldn't help but laugh when she saw her in such a foul mood. Naruto smiled at the sight of her attempting to suppress it. He felt that the start of the day had enough humor. He loved the way she smiled. He stepped closer, kissing the back of Anko's neck, causing her to shudder slightly as he embraced her from behind. The way she pressed back into his body, rubbing up against him a little, made it clear that she was open to spending some time with him, despite her warning, "Be careful what you get started there, Naruto." She had to bite her lip and sigh ever so slightly when his teeth grazed her neck as he hissed into her ear, "Heh, you actually do want to be a mother, don't you?" When Kasumi came to the room, her cheeks flushed bright crimson, her brush frantically trying to detangle her hair. "Ugh, not in the kitchen. People eat here." "I eat here," she cried. When Anko made fun of the girl, Kasumi stammered incoherently, "I'll have you know he eats here too." Naruto said, all right. Everyone relax. We need to eat dash," and then Anko cackled and Kasumi flushed brightly once more. "And finish up here. Kasumi, it's the big day if you're held back because you are late, who knows who your sensei might be. Although I might suggest Tenzo." The blonde's face became slightly paler. Though he was peculiar like many ANBUs and ex-ANBS, Tenzo was a close friend of her older brother. Every now and then, Tenzo would try to scare her by making an odd, lifeless fish face. It wasn't scary, but it was disgusting. Anko stifled another laugh as she delivered her prepared breakfast. The various domestic chores a couple conducted captivated Anko, but few may realize it given her appearance to most of the town. She had let her home become unkempt and disorganized when she had first arrived to Konoha. She suddenly acted almost like a housewife, happily cooking and cleaning, even if it meant cleaning up after the Uzumaki brothers. Naruto, however, urged that she also make Kasumi perform her fair amount of housework. The supper was quickly consumed by the three of them. Always as excellent as Anko's meal. A moment later, Kasumi was sprinting through the window toward the academy. Her brother rolled his eyes, but Anko only smiled as she washed the dishes. "How is your day going?" he asked as he walked over to dry and put the dishes she had cleaned. Same old, same old. Haven't had any new visitors in my cell block since you dropped off little old Mizuki. Been kinda boring, honestly. I'll go fill out some paperwork, then maybe head over to the tea shop. She gave him the plate and groaned. Sounds nice. I, for one, am going to the meeting at the tower. Team selections and requests are today. Think he'll let you have her? While putting away the last of the dishes, Naruto chuckled and remarked, I think he knows me well enough that if I don't get her there will be trouble. I can be very whiny and obnoxious if I want to be. Anko lifted an eyebrow at her man. She was surprised at how petty the young man who would give it his best and mock her could be. She smirked slightly as he gave her a blank stare. He was making empty threats against the Hokage, and she could see it. When do you have to go? She said. I still have a while still. Got an idea to kill some time? Naruto remarked with a smile that would make many ladies in the village swoon. For Anko, it just served to fan the fires that were already burning. She threw her mesh top back at the redhead and pulled it up over her head just before she entered the corridor, and as she passed, she tossed her coat across the back of a chair and said simply, yes. The woman giggled as he followed her back into their bedroom. The chamber was filled with most of Konoha's ranks of Jonin shinobi. The few that were absent were either in charge of a team of genin already or were too preoccupied with missions to take one for themselves. Since this was the day that the youngest batch of recruits graduated from the academy, the elder shinobi were being gathered to be assigned or, in certain cases, to seek genin for their teams. In reality, most wouldn't pick their own team. Requests are typically made just as a formality by the people making them. After all, Hiruzen had been waiting longer than others for this class to graduate because it had so many notable shinobi and clan heirs. Before every graduation, he typically met with fitting jonin to choose the best place for the genin's assignment. You're taking a team this year, Naruto? A female voice asked as Naruto entered the room to join the group. Naruto turned to see Kurenai standing behind Asuma. Others glanced at him, then returned their attention to their conversation partner. Yeah. Kasumi is graduating this year, so I figured it's time. You two hoping for any specific genin? Responded Naruto. I'm taking the new Inoshikacho trio. Their dads and mine have it all worked out already, I guess, replied Asuma. Knowing Naruto would dispute with her, Kurenai scowled a little as she said, I was actually hoping to pick up both Hinata and your younger sister. You'll be a good sensei for little Hinata. Between you taking her under your wing recently and my sister spending so much time with her, I know Hayashi has already seen a marked improvement in her abilities and the Hyuga main branch members are a lot less vocal and disapproving of her as the heiress. Naruto responded. At that, Kurenai smiled, then frowned again. And Kasumi? The only response Naruto gave was, "Don't worry about Kasumi. She is and always will be my responsibility." Don't you think that could be a little bit of a conflict of interest? Kurenai questioned in a somewhat too aggressive tone that made Asuma wince. Naruto's voice became flat and lifeless as he stared at her. I really don't care. Besides, couldn't the same be said for you and Hinata? He grumbled. Before the scarlet eyes finally broke away to concentrate on the front of the room, the blue and scarlet eyes appeared to be confronting one another. We'll see who the Hokage approves of, she said. Asuma shot a somewhat apologetic look toward Naruto, but the redhead simply waved him off. He knew Kurenai to some extent through Anko and his sister. Normally they were friendly, but the woman's lengthy journey from Tokujo to proper Jonin and similarly long journey to be considered one of the village's top Jonin made it clear that she was a little uncomfortable with her status. Kurenai did get along with her most of the time, despite her odd competitive streak. She was one of the few people who cared for Anko, even though she had previously been apprenticed to Orochimaru, and she had made it clear that she didn't care about Kasumi's Jinchuriki status. Naruto found it somewhat satisfying that the woman wanted Kasumi on her team as well, even though he believed it was mainly because she saw Hinata and Kasumi's development as interconnected. Naruto disagreed with that idea. If anything, Anko had worked most closely with Kasumi, and Kurenai was responsible for Hinata's rise. However, he didn't believe Kurenai herself felt that way. With enough volume to be heard above the noise in the room, Hiruzen yelled, "Welcome everyone." When he greeted them, the conversation ceased, and the group of Jonin stood up. Despite their lack of focus, they are clearly giving their leader their undivided attention. You all likely know why you are here already, but for formality's sake, I wish to announce it. You have been called to congregate before me to both requests and be assigned your genin students for the foreseeable future. As is the tradition begun by my own teacher, Lord Second, those selected as Jonin Sensei will each receive a team of 3 students whom they will then personally test for both ability and camaraderie before finalizing their team assignment with me. Starting us out, are there any team requests to be made at this time? Hiruzen droned on in a carefully honed duty. Yes. I, Asuma Sarutobi, request Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi to establish the next generation of the Ino Shikacho trio formation. I have previously worked with the previous incarnation of the team and was directly taught as a genin by Shikaku Nara, the clan head of the Nara clan and father of Shikamaru Nara. He requested I make this request personally, and all 3 have met with me in regards to the needs and schedules that the heirs in the proposed team would need. Asuma said loudly and professionally. Hiruzen hummed as he nodded and wrote something on the scroll in front of him. Asuma had just returned from 10 years of personal bodyguarding the daimyo and his family. Any objections? Asked the 3rd Hokage. With the team, there was no disagreement. The leaders of the 3 participating clans, Asuma, and the Hokage had clearly met beforehand to decide on the composition of the squad. Very well then. Any more requests? Asked Hiruzen. Yes, Lord Third. I would like to request both Hinata Hyuga and Kasumi Uzumaki as well as your recommendation for a possible genjutsu-focused student, Kurenai said. While some others gazed at her, Naruto regarded her with contempt. It wasn't exactly a secret that Naruto intended to enroll his sister in school. And your reasons for requesting them, Kurenai? Asked the Sarutobi chief. As you know, I have been working directly with Hinata for nearly a decade, Lord Hokage. I know how best to stimulate her growth and keep her working toward becoming a stronger kunoichi and an asset to the village, replied Kurenai. He answered, fair enough, But what of Kasumi? While I haven't been directly acting as her tutor as I have with Hinata, both girls are extremely close and I have become very familiar with her. Additionally, I know that Hinata and Kasumi help one another to grow as kunoichi, and I believe that on a TE together, they will go further than if they were apart, replied Kurenai. Hiruzen nodded slightly before humming loudly enough for everyone to hear. Are there any objections to these requests? Said Hiruzen. Naruto stepped forward to join Kurenai and replied, yes. All that Hiruzen said was, by all means, speak your mind, Naruto. I have nothing to say about Kurenai taking Hinata under her wing. If anything, she's a perfect fit for Hinata as a sensei. Unfortunately, I can't think that she could be any worse of a fit for my sister. Although she is a full-fledged jonin, her specialty remains genjutsu and chakra control. Perfect for the likes of a Hyuga who focuses on chakra control to the extreme. For an Uzumaki and my sister in particular, it would be a fruitless endeavor. Naruto felt a little bad because it appeared that Kurenai wasn't worthy of being a full-fledged elite jonin like himself. But in reality, her specialty was the complete opposite of what his sister needed in a sensei. You are suggesting yourself then. What would you offer that Kurenai can't? The Hokage asked, referring to himself as the typical neutral person in a quarrel among his jonin. Between Fuinjutsu and hidden techniques of my clan, she is best left with me. Combined with the reality of her tenant and the fact she is destined to be a ninjutsu heavy fighter like myself, I am confident I would be her best option. Hiruzen nodded and proceeded to write some additional notes on his scroll. Very well. Kurenai, you will be receiving Hinata in your team. However, Kasumi will be assigned to Naruto. There is no one available in our ranks more fit to watch over her training and her burden than Naruto is. Now, any other requests? Hiruzen replied. There were no more team requests, and Hiruzen wrote for a little while on his scroll before returning his attention to the shinobi that had gathered. One by one, he listed the new teams and their teachers. As expected, Asuma received the 3 students he had asked for. Shino Aburame, Kiba Inuzuka, and Hinata were given to Kurenai. Suitable choices. It gave her a student who had been trained in chakra management in Shino and was perfect for teaching some genjutsu techniques, and it was also an excellent sensor and taijutsu fighter in Hinata. Furthermore, there are enough multi-role shinobi in Kiba. She could really prove herself with her squad. Naruto was a little surprised by his co-workers. Kasumi was a given, and he had a hunch that Sakura would be entrusted to him. It was evident that the pink-haired girl was starting to make a name for herself among her classmates by employing medical techniques and chakra control, as Kasumi had informed him about her. He assumed that she would either join Kurenai or him as a support shinobi. The last one, though, was a little surprising. Setsuna Uchiha was his old acquaintance's younger sister, and the sole individual he had spared amid the carnage of his clan. Why the woman had been recruited to his team was a mystery to him. In particular, Kasumi had repeatedly informed him how poorly she and Setsuna got along. Naruto, I need to talk to you about your team after they pass your test, Hiruzen said as the Jonin gang began to disperse. After the test? Wouldn't before the test be better in case they don't pass? I think you'll find yourself hard-pressed to fail them. All 3 of them are among our most promising young shinobi. We had an unusually higher quantity of kunoichi than most years this year, so our Rookie of the Year and Kunoichi of the Year were more like a first and second place award. You'll be happy to know Kasumi snagged the second place Kunoichi of the Year spot rather easily. So the Uchiha is the top of the class then? Yes. Setsuna is a very driven young woman. Yeah, I bet. Would you like to come over for dinner tonight, then? I'll test them straight out the gate, and we can meet and eat, replied Naruto. Is Anko cooking? Hiruzen asked. Usually. Then I'm happy to come over. I think both Anko and Kasumi should be present for the conversation as well. It concerns your father and his heritage. Hiruzen responded. Naruto narrowed his gaze and gave his Kage a nod before disappearing into smoke and making his way to the academy. Naruto sat on the tree limb outside the third-floor windows of the academy. He was already familiar with the classroom his sister and her kids were using this year. In between assignments, he had stopped over to check on her. Because Kasumi had a habit of skipping class, he decided to take her back. But Kasumi was not yet abandoning. Instead, she was sitting there talking passionately to Sakura Haruno, who was clearly uncomfortable. It seemed like the other students were already being picked up by their sensei and departing, even though Naruto's 3 new charges were clearly made worse by his current absence. The redhead studied each of his 3 projected pupils slowly. Since Kasumi was his sister, it goes without saying that she was the easiest to read on. The blonde was excited beyond belief. When she was excited or anxious about something, she was talking and babbling as normal. Naruto felt it was a lovely little quirk, even though it was a touch annoying for the person she was chatting to. He wanted to show her what being a shinobi actually meant. Not just the childhood he and Anko had given her. The unfortunate victim of Kasumi's verbal abuse, Sakura Haruno, was probably the person Naruto knew the least about. Her evidence showed that her grades were much above average. She was a really smart girl. In theory and bookwork, he suspected she was one of the finest, if not the best, in her class. A strong foundation upon which he could teach her the more practical skills she would need. He was grateful that the old Hokage had made the graduates of the academy older so far. It gave teachers a lot more time to work with pupils and help them develop their skill sets before they even met their Jonin sensei. It was clear that Sakura had put her all into her training until she began to fall behind in her class's practical skills. It was Kasumi who had told Naruto about the sole female in their class who wasn't from the clan. His desire to instruct her was nearly equal to his desire to instruct Kasumi. But he said that he was definitely inclined toward his favorite blonde. The last person in the group sat down separately from the other 2. There was no doubt that Sakura and Kasumi did not wish to converse with the girl with the raven hair, and Setsuna had no intention of doing so. That might really be a problem. The talent of the Uchiha is diverse. She had a lot of drive, but she was also a testy brat. At least that was Kasumi's more polite way of describing her classmate. She created her Sharingan when all academy students began their first basic fighting exercises at the age of 13. That being said, there was a lot of worry about what she would do next. Though the necessity of restoring her tribe had become a taboo subject among youngsters, she publicly stated her desire to do it. But a lot of people doubted that she was as dedicated to bringing her clan back to Konoha as she appeared to be in public. Except for the few trainers she hired to work with her, her academy teachers, and the few stores she purchased goods from, she avoided interacting with her peers and didn't connect with anyone else. Naruto was nearly as worried about it as he was about Anko disclosing that Setsuna's psychiatric evaluation prior to her graduation test had led the information department to classify her as a high flight risk. It would take a lot of work to raise her. Ironically, she was, in principle, the most mature of the 3 girls. Even though he was excited to face a squad, he knew that this one in particular would provide many difficulties, so he grumbled to himself, "I suppose I had best get this over with." When he appeared immediately behind her with another body flicker, Kasumi shrieked and jumped out of her seat. He gave him a dagger-like gaze while hiding a smirk, and Sakura also stifled a giggle. Ugh, why couldn't you use the door like a normal person? What took you so long anyway? Kasumi sighed. After replying, trust me, I'm not the worst when it comes to that. Anyway, follow me and we can get acquainted over something to eat. Naruto casually made his way to the door. The two girls followed the red-haired figure when Kasumi turned to Sakura. Setsuna slowly followed the two more gregarious girls for a long time. They needed to go a short distance. Just down the street and around the corner is one of the Uzumaki family's favorite places to have a hot lunch. It was his parents' custom to prepare Ichirako ramen. He would behave toward his students like he had been behaved toward as a child. A moment later, the four of them were seated at the table of the Ichiraku noodle stand. Recalling how his mother and father had carried him inside the tiny stand, Naruto grinned quietly. He also had a lot of memories of bringing Kasumi here during her early years. Naruto's wording caused the girls to stare at him suspiciously. If we all become a team, we'll be meeting here regularly for team building meals and some downtime to discuss what we can improve upon. Go ahead and order whatever you want, my treat. Whispered Sakura after everyone had delivered their orders. As Ayam returned their drinks, Naruto casually dismissed the subject. Heh, caught on already? I shouldn't be surprised, it seems like you three were all pretty much the top of the class in your specialties. Naruto said, let's start this off by getting to know one another. Obviously Kasumi and I already know one another, but sadly enough I don't know the two of you beyond your grades. Sakura and Setsuna were the primary recipients of this comment. The three girls stared at him blankly, and he sighed. Girls, this isn't a pop quiz or something. Just introduce yourselves. Tell me a little about what makes you you. Here, I'll start off, then Kasumi can go and we can go from there. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm a jonin and have been a shinobi since I was 6. I enjoy experimenting with new techniques and I'm pretty excited to begin training some students of my own. As far as hobbies, I mostly spend my free time either working on my techniques or seals, or cleaning up after my younger sister. Kasumi, go ahead. Naruto waved to the blonde. A half-hearted frown about following her was returned to the shot. You all know me already, I like learning shinobi skills I guess and some other stuff as well. I enjoy spending time with my brother and his girlfriend even when he is deciding to be a smartass. I guess I just want to be the best kunoichi I can be. She quickly concluded with her objective. Naruto knew that wasn't precisely what she was thinking, but he wasn't going to push the matter. Especially before to the other two. Great. Either of you want to volunteer for who goes next? Naruto asked, glancing at the other two girls who would be on his squad. Sakura gave a really awkward "I suppose I could go" response before straightening up. I'm Sakura Haruno, I enjoy reading, and I guess learning new techniques like you too. I don't really do much with ninjutsu, but the last couple of years I have been really working on taijutsu. It's great for a workout and for fighting, so it's kind of a win-win for me. I also took a lot of additional support classes in the academy. My mom helps out at a clinic and my dad used to be a shinobi in the last war before he was injured. He says he only survived because of Lord Forth and the medics. Naruto smiled kindly and reassuringly at the girl to encourage her to continue. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she began to divulge some more personal information about why she became a kunoichi. She paused to catch her breath, then continued, embarrassed to reveal something so personal to her. When she became aware that her speech was going too fast for the audience to follow, she stopped. It made me want to become a medic ninja. I've worked on my chakra control even before joining the academy. I had to do that to even get in since I had such small reserves. Now my control is the best in our class though. I can even perform some healing jutsu. But before any discomfort could have hung over her, Naruto quickly nodded and grinned at her. But that placed them close to the group's tail. His unruly child. The Uchiha groaned and began to speak, even though she was rolling her eyes. I'm Setsuna Uchiha. I like to train and to fight. I want to rebuild the Uchiha clan. I have the Sharingan and I'm good at the shinobi arts. Do you have a more specific art that you prefer among the disciplines? Asked Naruto in a kind manner. She responded bluntly, no. Sharply, he thought, wonderful, a pleasure to speak with you. Well, looks like our food is here, so let's waste no more time and dig right in. Naruto chirped happily. Kasumi cocked an eyebrow at her brother, but she shrugged and started eating carelessly. She was soon to discover that was a mistake. But for her, it would not arrive soon enough. After they had all finished their bowls, the girls realized they felt a little lightheaded. Their bellies are growling. Perhaps even nauseous. Ah, oops, I forget to let you know. There is one final test before you become my genin. You aren't doing very well on it so far either. He chuckled. What? What do you mean by that? Ugh. Kasumi asked, then let out a groan as though her stomach were getting constricted. Well, there is a final test. I have to personally test you all for a specific aspect that I am looking for in this team. I'm not going to tell you outright what it is. Unfair as it may seem, it's good to start off learning the reality of nothing ever actually being fair in our world. Naruto was lecturing them as they were all grasping in pain. He asked, it's really starting to kick in now, huh? Sensei, what did you do to us? Sakura was able to ask. Nothing much really. I slipped a clone into the kitchen to meet with our cute server and maybe dropped a little something into your ramen as it was being dished up. Nothing too bad. Just enough poison to put you in the hospital and fail this test. Unless of course you manage to get the antidote with me. Sadly, I only have 3 vials, and Naruto complained before opening a small tube and consuming its contents. Why? Setsuna questioned. Naruto replied, oh, well see, I thought why not just poison all of the bowls. Kasumi has a tendency to snag food from my plate and I needed to make sure I got her too. Unfortunately, that only leaves you all with 2 vials to take. You only have about an hour till you'll pass out from the poison too. If you can't report to the mission office to sign the finalized team form in 2 hours, well, you fail and get to go back for remedial training at the academy. Then he disappeared in a simple whirl of leaves and wind. Come try and get your shot at passing whenever you're ready, girls. I've got all day, but the clock is ticking for you. Naruto watched quietly as the 3 youngsters paused to try to get their bearings. He had left them at the Ichiraku seats, and they were still sitting there. He had to concede that it was hilarious how they answered their quick test. As he had expected, Kasumi managed it very well. She was also a cunning person, and both Anko's and her own antics had tempted Naruto into a similarly mischievous mood. She was already working quickly to find a solution, and although this was very important to her, it felt almost like a practical joke. Sakura, on the other hand, was a very bookish girl. She was serious and appeared to have been short-circuited by her teacher's casual teasing and poisoning of her. The pink cat was currently staring at the spot where he had disappeared and gripping her stomach in mild discomfort. As if he was still not getting it. However, Setsuna shocked him. She hadn't tried to chase him as her first move or come up with a plan. All she had done was call the waitress and ask her what exactly he had done to them. However, ask might have been being courteous. The Uchiha really needed to work on their interpersonal abilities. She was smart enough, though, to not believe him. That wouldn't really help her in this situation. After all, he hadn't really poisoned them. None of them would wind up in the hospital after a few hours of feeling queasy and bloated, and they would be perfectly well. But by then the exam would have been over. He intended to pit them against one another to observe how they responded to stress. There were only 2 antidotes at the time, after all. With his gaze, he whispered to them, "Come on girls, clock's ticking." Kasumi's mind was rushing to think of the best way to handle this situation. She was now the person who knew Naruto the best, possibly with the exception of Anko. He was still someone she knew. Even though I knew his tricks, it wasn't enough. She had no idea how to catch him, much less how to acquire the antidote from him. He had 2 of them left out of the 3. It also didn't help that Sakura's mouth was still open and that Setsuna kept asking poor Iam questions about the bottle of fluid their sensei had clearly poured into their food. She might be in serious need of assistance in solving this puzzle. She used the same process when she trained at home with Naruto or Anko, often having the ability to use one against the other, or at least make one work to her advantage. She blinked. With a sigh, she said to her teammates, "Oh, that's stupid easy." "What?" Sakura asked. Upon realizing the game he was playing, she grinned and said, "The whole thing with 2 antidotes is a trick. My dick of a big brother is trying to push us apart for the test. The whole thing is partially trying to push our teamwork. More than just that probably, but the whole thing with 2 antidotes is a trick." "You're sure?" Setsuna asked. She didn't really get along with anyone, though she did have some respect for the 2 girls on her squad. "A couple." "Pretty sure, but that doesn't tell us where he is or give us a way to take them from him. He was ANBU, he's super scary in a fight," she replied. The other 2 looked at each other anxiously. Setsuna seemed to have just swallowed something nasty, but Sakura was clearly nervous. "Well, is there any kind of clue as to where he might be?" replied Setsuna. Though she wasn't really certain, Kasumi muttered, maybe his favorite training ground. He could be waiting to fight us there." "Wait, he never said anything about having to get the antidotes from him, did he?" "We could go to the hospital. I've been having classes there for my medical studies and they could help us," replied Sakura. The other 2 paused, mentally remembering the conversation with Naruto. Kasumi said, "Gah." "Of course," and slapped her forehead. Setsuna agreed, knowing that they would probably be able to find another way. He only said we had to present ourselves in front of the mission office to sign the team form in 2 hours. "Well, come on. What are you waiting for? We can cut over the bridge and through the Senju Annex straight to the hospital," Kasumi exclaimed as she began to sprint. The other 2 exclaimed, "Right," and followed suit. Naruto smiled as the 3 girls sprinted off toward the hospital. They were smart to try to think outside the box. Nor had he restricted their application to the antidotes he had. There's nowhere better than the hospital to get help. Unfortunately, he had been ready for just that. The previous Senju Annex took up most of the space between the hospital and the center market of the hamlet, where the team was initially stationed. After a few blocks, a preserve replaced a residential area. One made specifically for shinobi to use indoors to hone their skills. Additionally, it would be created especially to evaluate the girls at this particular moment. Naruto positioned himself in the center of the annex's main clearing using another body flicker. The three girls abruptly stopped in front of him, and he smiled. Girls, you wouldn't happen to be thinking of cheating, would you? Naruto said in a mocking tone. The three kunoichi jumped out of the trees to dodge the two shuriken he had decided to distribute over the canopy. Although it was slow and by no means a severe threat to them, he wasn't preparing them for fight. Not yet, anyhow. That would occur after a quick conversation. In an effort to communicate to them the traits he was seeking in his pupils without explicitly disclosing them, Naruto sketched. You know, if two of you do somehow pass, you'll be setting yourselves up for a rough relationship with me if you try to fool me. I don't need genin who go behind my back. I need genin who are loyal and trustworthy. So what now? Setsuna asked, not shockingly. What do you mean? Naruto asked. What do we do now? Fight you, she asked with a bit more vigor. Naruto slightly exaggerated the idiot. He blinked and twisted his head, as if looking for individuals who weren't there. Well, I suppose you might as well. Nothing here to stop you, right? Setsuna didn't answer right away. She quickly reviewed the hand signals for Big Fireball Jutsu. It was already quite well liked in Konoha ranks, but it was a mainstay for Uchiha. It wasn't as advanced or powerful, but Setsuna's was much larger than Naruto's previous memories of Itachi. Still, it was enough to have the teacher dodge the explosion. Only to find a kunai drawn back to stab him, and the Uchiha female standing right in front of him. As her Sharingan came to life in her eyes, Naruto could clearly see the blood-red eyes that were fixed on him. Sharingan, I didn't think you would activate it so quickly in this fight. Should I worry you rely too heavily on it? He replied, raising his own kunai to block her attack. You're a jonin. It would be foolish to think I could take you without them, she said, trying to change the point of contact between their little blade lock and adjusting her weight. Before she could reply, he said, it may just be a little foolish to think you are ready to take me on alone, even with those pretty eyes of yours, and jerked her off her balance before snapping out his other hand. After receiving a hard kick to the stomach, Setsuna eventually fell to the ground at Sakura's and Kasumi's feet. The untimely loss of Setsuna surprised the three of them. Though less so than the other two, Kasumi had become somewhat arrogant about her skills as a Sharingan. Throughout their training in the latter sections of the academy, Setsuna had proven unbeatable whenever the rest of them used it. Setsuna groaned as she stumbled to her feet, so that's what a jonin is like. Naruto mockingly said, please. You three haven't seen anything yet, as he went calmly back to where he had been standing across from them. Remember, girls. Tick-tock, tick-tock. How's your stomachs? Naruto remarked with a smile. Kasumi stuck her tongue out at him as the other two took on determined looks. It's highly unlikely that they intended to break up that soon. That made him very happy. Seeing his prospective students show backbone made him very happy. Kasumi shouted, Sakura, keep him pressured with some range. Setsuna, you can react faster in taijutsu. I'll hit him with some ninjutsu, as she demonstrated the hand signals for a water technique Naruto had previously taught her. As he began to evade the furious Uchiha's lightning-fast attack and the surprisingly precise Senbon, Shuriken, and Kunai, Naruto mockingly said, pretty simplistic, little sister. I think you might need to work on your team tactics. If you pass, that is. Almost casually, he continued to sidestep each of their attacks. Sakura might have avoided the flying sharp objects by bending slightly backward and weaving to the left. Kasumi might have escaped the searing hot high-pressure jet of water by making a timely lunge and crouch, and Setsuna might have avoided the combo by taking 3 steps to the right and turning. They were certainly working together despite the lack of coordination. That was acceptable, he thought. Still, he wanted to do the test. Ensure that he understood exactly what each of them was adding to the conversation. The time has come for a bit more force. For his own big fireball, Naruto employed a sealless technique. He purposefully made it smaller than Setsuna's from earlier, but it still had a severe surprise. Sakura fired a sunbon at him again, and he moved to the right to avoid it. The ball of flame that burst from his mouth raced across the gap between the females as they regrouped. However, it flared before splitting into 3 tiny jets of flame, each aiming at a separate genin potential, before it could reach them halfway. As she and the other 2 kunoichi jumped out of the way of the strike, Setsuna cried out in shock, "What the hell is that? That's a new one for me too." "Looks like he's been holding out on me," Kasumi said as the 3 women watched the flames burn 3 holes in the grass where they had been standing. Naruto said, "You don't have time to gawk at the light show, girls." He then swooped behind them and unleashed a spinning kick that could have caught all 3 of them if Sakura and Kasumi hadn't been pulled aside by Setsuna. When the Jonin realized that the Uchiha had pulled them to safety, their glee grew. Sakura shielded her stomach from the thought, saying, "He's too fast to follow." The minor ache in her stomach paled in contrast to the near concussion she had. "I can mostly follow him with my Sharingan, but sometimes he gets away from me still. Even then, I can't react in time. Earlier I would have had him dead to rights if he was on our level," said Setsuna. "Yeah, but I'm a Jonin, not a Genin." The women tried to turn away from Naruto, but he grabbed Kasumi by the ankle and used her to push her 2 co-workers away. Afterward, he casually tossed her in the same direction as the other 2. They all collapsed in a heap as Naruto halted his attack, allowing them time to collect their thoughts and struggle to their feet. Unfortunately, Kasumi was suffering from the effects of the medication he had previously taken as well as the quick action Naruto had just put her through. As Ramen hurriedly painted the grounds, Naruto winced. Using the back of her fingers, Kasumi wiped her lips and groaned, "Ugh, this sucks." "You train with him, right? What the hell are we supposed to do?" replied Setsuna. "Well, he's never really used me like a club, so what the hell do you want from me?" Kasumi responded angrily. "Oh, I don't know, how about an idea of how we are supposed to win?" "You should know him better than anyone, right?" Setsuna yelled. "What the hell do you want me to say?" growled Kasumi. "So what, I have to save your asses from the Jonin trying to beat our asses and hold your hand in figuring out your own damn brother?" Setsuna sighed. "Stop it. We can't do anything if you 2 are too busy trying to fight one another. He won't wait around for us to get our shit together forever," Sakura said, acting as a mediator and interrupting them. The other 2 sagged slightly at that point. Sakura was right. If they didn't work together more, they were going to be in for a lot of suffering and perhaps failure. Naruto said, "Well done, Sakura. It is better to work together than fight one another, but sometimes just working together isn't enough. Take this for instance." He grabbed his sister by the hair from behind and used a kunai to draw a thin line across her arm. Kasumi cried out in shock and pain. Naruto trembled within at what he was doing, even though it was merely a minor wound. It would hurt, and at most she would have a paper-thin scar across her arm. However, it would push them. Drawing real blood during this training would push them to the edge. Sometimes even when you work together, you all just lose in the end. "So what's better, one of you lose and 2 of you win, or all of you lose together?" asked Naruto, holding the 2 antidotes above their heads. "What do you want, sensei?" Sakura asked, profoundly uneasy about his tendency to harm his own sister. Setsuna was awful beside him. Sharingan was silent, absorbed in the scene in front of her. "I want to make an offer." I'll take both of you on as students. You two both get an antidote and I get to convince Lord Third that Kasumi is best kept at home. She could maybe even get a job at that ramen place until she finds a good husband and settles down safely within the village walls. That's much better than her going out and risking herself. You two though, I can teach you everything I know and make you some real killers, replied Naruto. Kasumi opened her mouth to say, but his palm closed over her lips, stopping her. But as her eyes met theirs, she pleaded with her colleagues. Sakura glanced across at Setsuna, who continued to stare at the two Uzumaki. Unlike Setsuna, Sakura could not see the small tears that welled up in Kasumi's eyes as the effect of Naruto's words took hold. The notion that he didn't think she was good enough to be a kunoichi. That he was willing to pressure her comrades into letting her lead a normal life. Until Kasumi realized how stupid it was, anyway. Given how much he trained her as a child, why would he make her go now? Beyond the typical 3 genin per jonin element of teams, it made little sense. She wished only that Sakura could see through her brother's stupid deception and pass his little test. Speaking softly to the girls, Naruto said, "Show me your resolve. You will lose comrades as a kunoichi. Show me you understand what it means to make a sacrifice." With a scowl, Sakura continued, "I won't sacrifice a teammate for something so dumb as that." Naruto's lips trembled as he let the 2 kunai, one from each girl, to puncture his eyes. The shadow clone then burst into smoke. Kasumi collapsed to the ground and stumbled toward the others. Sakura quickly repaired the thin red mark on the girl's arm, and she moaned with joy as the painful sting suddenly disappeared. "What the hell is up with your brother? He's not like what I expected," Setsuna cried, her blazing eyes scouring the brush around them for their possible sensei. While Kasumi began to look at the brush with Setsuna in her sights, she responded, "He's really intense at times, but this is a whole new level I haven't really seen before. I mean, I think he usually takes it kind of easy on me, but he did say that when I graduated he couldn't take it easy on me ever again. That I would have to be toughened up or whatever. We need a plan before he comes back to beat us up some more then." "How are we going to get the antidotes from him?" said Sakura. Kasumi grinned and said, "We don't have to. I already feel really dizzy." "Kasumi, how are we supposed to get to the mission office if we start passing out?" responded Sakura. The other 2 women nodded their heads gently as Kasumi had instructed. "We don't need his antidotes. We just have to get past him to the hospital like we already planned. Follow my lead, all right?" Naruto observed them conversing, but he was too far away to hear them. He smiled, seeing the bonds between the squad beginning to form already. These 3 would make a big difference. He would take care of that. With one more push during this training session, however, he could declare that they had already passed his exam. He liked them and was interested to see how they would respond to being the legal genin of the Leaf. This time, rather of abusing his speed advantage, he came out of his hiding location with the easy air of a daytime walk. The girls became more tense as soon as they realized he was coming. He was a little surprised that they could, to be honest. Already, it seemed like they were all about to lose it. Despite their annoyed expressions, he smiled at them charmingly. It didn't matter if he had some reservations about the truth of what he had just said. "All right, girls, this had gone on long enough. You all want to stay side by side so badly that I'll just push you all out of the program. I think I'll just beat on you a bit, then drag you before the Hokage to show that you don't quite meet my criteria. I am pretty sure he'll drop you 3 if I ask nicely." The language and tone just served to exacerbate their already angry attacks on him. "Why so upset? I'm doing you all a favor. I mean, you 3 don't need to worry about things like fighting anyway. You should think about a peaceful career and life. Maybe even families. Either way, I think a couple days in the infirmary will be able to put your minds on the right track. He continued to taunt. Kasumi was already running through hand signals, and Setsuna was only a fraction of a second slower. Another gout of flame roared to life in front of him. To further demonstrate his abilities, Naruto executed a single-handed motion that turned the ball of flame into a cloud of smoke and sent a torrent of water shooting out of his lips. Then he realized that was what they had wanted. A surge of kunai tore through the thick fog that had just obstructed his vision. If not for the sizzle of the paper explosives on them, he could have missed them. Most likely not. However, it was meticulously organized and executed. He had to use substitution to stop the explosion when the third and last of the Petite Three finished her hand signals and threw a powerful ninjutsu at him, but even that seemed to have been planned. Ninjutsu was unique in that it needed to be fed the correct amount of chakra. If it wasn't, it would either overwhelm and essentially backfire or sputter and fail. However, that did not rule out the possibility of a way to use chakra to intensify a technique and turn something that was normally strong into something horrible. The problem was that it relied on a powerful chakra network to do so. Ordinary shinobi could do that, but they would ultimately effectively disable themselves. Their tenketsu and chakra channels could not handle the load. For this reason, too powerful jutsu usually backfired. The stream of chakras changed when the network was degraded. Some shinobi, though, were a bit too aggressive for that to be a problem. The Sannin were, of course, shinobi with greater networks and more durable tenketsu. Due to genetic chance. The Uzumaki cheated, just like a lot of other things. It was a genetic quirk that had been passed down through the generations. There was no one with whom to compare such things because the Senju were practically extinct, but this was probably also the case for them. Naruto used that as a cheat. But Kasumi's advantage was far greater. Her load had been steadily consuming her chakra network since the day of her birth, making it more robust. Consequently, she was finally able to overcome nearly any jutsu she came across. Her parents and older brother were unable to accomplish it. The wind that was sent at Naruto was therefore nothing less than a small cyclone, tearing up the ground and trees as it sped toward him. For a while, he had to focus entirely on the issue. Kasumi hadn't planned to use so much force in the attack, but it didn't really matter at the time. Luckily, Naruto inherited his father's reputation for quickness. Even though he was not aware of the Harem at the time, he was one of the fastest shinobi in Konoha history. It only allowed Naruto to escape with a torn pant leg and a bleeding foot. A little ego harm on top of that. In fact, considering the intensity of her attack, he shouldn't have hesitated as much as he did. The Senju Annex was not so lucky. At least 30 trees had been uprooted or torn to ribbons, and the ground had been dug into a deep trench nearly 5 meters broad. An injured leg was nothing compared to what that would have done to him. Naruto, said Kasumi as she saw him tumble into the nearby grass. That was something. Naruto said, trying to examine his wound, I don't think Lord Hokage is going to let us use this space for training. Ever. To his amazement, the girls soon surrounded him. While Sakura tends to his injuries, Kasumi worries about him. He wasn't surprised, to be honest, that Setsuna seemed more concerned with taking the 2 bottles of supposed antidote off his vest. But the last few moments caught up with him, and a mixture of pride, laughter, and sheer incredulity arose inside him until he laughed at the rather absurd situation he had found himself in. Naruto? Kasumi asked hesitantly. As he attempted to recover himself and explain things to his new students, he couldn't help but grin at her nervous countenance, which seemed to be wondering whether he had gone crazy in the last few hours. Kakashi would have a great day with the rest of the erstwhile Team Row. You girls all exceeded my expectations completely. The antidotes are fake, Setsuna. I didn't poison you guys, well, not really anyway. Your stomachs will be fine soon enough, and you don't need to be in the mission office to sign anything. I just have to approve the team, Naruto said with a suppressed laugh. It wasn't funny that he allowed a bunch of genin to hit him, it was awkward. Sakura noticed that all three of them were staring at him as his foot started to hurt again and his mending jutsu waned. What? He questioned them. Are you going to approve us? Asked Kasumi. I said you passed, didn't I? He asked with a sly smile. Kasumi grinned back, then cheered loudly and gathered her two allies in an impromptu group hug. Even though Setsuna seemed prepared to bite her if she didn't release go, Sakura instantly joined in on Kasumi's high-pitched scream and hopped up and down beside her. Not to ruin the moment or anything, but Sakura, do you mind? Naruto asked, pointing at his foot. When Sakura realized she had entirely forgotten what she had been doing only a moment earlier, she blushed a little. Ha! Oh my gosh, sorry sensei. Here, it's nothing major, just some minor abrasions and bruising. You are going to need new pants and sandals though. After Sakura had finished tending to his foot, Naruto replied, no worries. I have that handled. Anyway, this is it for us today, girls. Tomorrow we will meet at the missions office and we will handle some basic file work. The fun bureaucratic stuff that someone managed to hammer into place, all that kind of stuff. You all really impressed me, you know. I'm going to have a lot of fun training you, and if that little three-piece combo you guys used on me at the end is any sign, I definitely won't be taking it easy on you anytime soon. I'm going to work you girls hard, but you'll be the strongest kunoichi this village has ever produced when I'm done with you, or dead. Naruto chuckled. All of the girls, but especially his sister, giggled uneasily at the dark humor and the seeming threat of very harsh instruction. As his figure shifted back toward the Uzumaki home, Naruto said, like I said. Good job. Now Kasumi, you and I need to be heading home. We need to get cleaned up. We have a guest tonight. See you two later. When Naruto got home, cleaned up, and dressed a little more formally, he told Kasumi that the Hokage was apparently coming over to talk to them all about something. She asked him for details, of course. Sadly for her, he was completely ignorant of the subject the elderly man wished to bring up this time. Both of them believed it was most likely a little celebration of Kasumi's in-person arrival among other shinobi and kunoichi members. But a small voice in the back of Naruto's mind told him that the subject of discussion would be something far more important. Kasumi was moaning on the sofa. I'm so hungry. It wouldn't be so bad if someone didn't make me hurl earlier. All that ramen put to waste. For shame. Naruto shook his head and glanced over with a faint smirk. Not my fault you can't hold your food down. It is your fault, was the cryptic response. You poisoned me and then used me like a bat. He what? Anko asked as she walked through the front door of the house. Getting a little aroused and wanting to organize an attack on her older brother, Kasumi suddenly sprung to her feet and poked a finger at Naruto, shouting, He poisoned me and the others on the team and then used me like a club to beat on them. She should have come to know Anko better by now. Oh, why the hell didn't you invite me along? That would have been the highlight of my day, the snake mistress chirped, and Kasumi sank back onto the couch in defeat as Naruto laughed. Anko collapsed onto her partner's lap, leaning back against him with delight. They both laughed too loudly till Kasumi gave them the bird and turned away from them on the couch. They continued to pull tricks on the blonde, but that made them laugh again. As he ran a hand under her skirt to rub her ass, Naruto stage whispered to Anko, "Hey, since she's not paying attention, what do you think?" After smiling, Anko moved such that she nearly straddled him in his lap. "I dunno, she might see something her poor innocent mind isn't ready for." "No, trust me, it would be good for her. After all, she's all grown up now, you know." "I'm sure she knows all about this kind of thing," Naruto said as they both began pawing at one another in an exaggerated manner and kissed loudly and passionately. As Kasumi exclaimed, "Ugh, I only know as much as I do because you two are shameless perverts. Seriously, it's like everywhere in the house is free game to you two." The bright red blush and the pair of eyes that peered out to watch the free show made it clear that there were likely 3 perverts living in the house. When Kasumi saw it, he groaned a little. Although she was certainly ashamed, it was not the reason she felt envious. She wanted what they had, but she still had to carry the burden even though the Konoha community accepted her for the most part. It would, too. Besides, she really didn't care about the boys her age. Her thoughts were interrupted as the doorbell rang. She jumped up to go answer it and prayed briefly to the gods for their generosity as Naruto and Anko slowly drifted apart. The older members of the household took great pleasure in ridiculing their younger equivalent. The pleasure was over for the moment as Kasumi welcomed the Hokage and led him back into the living area. Both Naruto and Anko leaped to their feet and greeted him with the words "Lord Hokage." As he gestured for everyone to take their seats again, the old man said, "Oh, don't be so serious on my account. This meeting isn't something we need to be all official about. Just an important conversation over a meal." He joined them in the living room, taking his seat in one of the chairs. "A couple clones are working on dinner, so it will be ready soon. Do you want anything to drink?" Anko added, staying upright. "Do you have any tea?" Hiruzen asked the young woman with a kind grin, adding, "I'm afraid I've missed sitting and having a cup with you for some time now." Upon returning to the kitchen, Anko joyfully cried, coming right up. As she was leaving, Hiruzen asked how the test went, looking at the 2 Uzumaki in the room, who were still smiling warmly. Naruto looked at Kasumi as the girl grinned at their boss. The old man didn't bother attempting to keep his face intact because Kasumi would be telling everyone she could about getting a good hit on him for the rest of the week. We passed. Sakura even had to fix up our sensei 'cause he wasn't taking us seriously enough. She chuckled. "Is that right?" questioned Hiruzen, grinning at Naruto. "Perhaps my jonin need to be reminded that they are not in fact infallible." When Naruto sighed loudly, the others chuckled, but Anko stopped him from getting any more teasing when she came back with the drink. As Naruto continued, "They did pass, and as much as I don't want to admit it, Kasumi managed to land a minor blow with the help of her teammates. They really are something else. I look forward to working with them all." The blonde girl cheered a little, and the old man laughed. After seemingly assessing each of the young shinobi gathered around him, the Hokage exclaimed, "That's excellent news." Anko enthusiastically offered the old leader her arm and remarked, "Oh, my clone just popped. Time for dinner. Be careful, my dear little Naruto could become envious of us," he joked as he allowed Anko to wrap her arm around the old man's arm and guide him into the dining area. "Oh, you think so? Maybe he's on to our affair, Lord Hokage. We can still run away together, you know." Anko laughed. Seeing Kasumi mimic Anko, but with Naruto in his place, Hiruzen laughed and remarked, "I think you're a bit too much for these old bones to handle, my dear. I'm afraid I have to bow to the better man in this situation." The smiles and happy disposition of the small family truly moved the old man's heart. Much better than his nearly empty house and cold office. He hoped his discussion topic wouldn't detract from the mood. Naruto chuckled as they all took their seats at the table and began to eat, saying, "Younger man, but not the better one. I assure you of that, Lord Hokage." The lunch was only a continuation of the festive atmosphere that pervaded the Uzumaki residence. The trio spoke cheerfully as Anko prepared a little feast for them. But after a while, things slowed down once more. When the lunch was ended, Hiruzen became more serious and thoughtful, and let the younger three in. Hiruzen said, "That really was a treat, Anko. Thank you. Unfortunately, I must be getting to the real business of my visit," as he pulled his pipe from his sleeve and lighted it with a tiny flame. The three of them remained silent while he reoriented himself. It was a challenging topic to discuss. Starting with the least recent portion could be better. As you know, you are all that we are aware of remaining of the Uzumaki clan. This clan status has granted you specialized rights and advantages within the village that many others are simply not privy to. Among them is the preferential treatment in selecting teams and missions. Hiruzen laughed. Kasumi then turned to face Naruto and Anko. It was clear that both of the older shinobi knew their advantages, even though Kasumi did not. They weren't as invasive as some of the benefits enjoyed by the other clans she knew about. The Hyuga sprang to mind. In the end, the municipality chose to overlook the issue in regard to their practice of enslaving clan members. It was a momentous occasion, especially compared to what Kasumi believed her tribe was receiving. "You intend to take Kasumi to the shrine soon, yes? Anko as well?" Hiruzen said, causing the blonde to turn back to her brother in bewilderment. He gave the Hokage a comforting look before turning to face his sister. "Yes. Just like the other clans, we get more than just the basic preferences for teams and missions, Kasumi. I'll show you soon. It's an important part of our clan's heritage after all." The blonde nodded, then listened as the Hokage resumed his conversation. She also made it clear that Anko would also be observing these events. This demonstrated her brother's unwavering commitment to assimilating the older woman into the clan. Of course, the only way he could do this would be through marriage. The squeak of joy and the scream of vengeance swirled up inside her, but she smothered both. Not only was it improper for her to feel that way now, but she also needed to decide what position she wanted to take. Anko was like a sister to her, after all. The problem was that Hiruzen sighed, causing Anko to giggle and Naruto to smile slightly. "Well, I'll leave managing your clan to you as always, Naruto. You've done an excellent job so far. I definitely wish Asuma would show the same commitment to maintaining our clan as you do yours." The elderly gentleman was mainly being facetious. Despite Hiruzen's 10-year absence, Asuma had put in a lot of effort since his return to take over the clan's leadership whenever he quit as its head. He was an excellent shinobi. That all being said, I'm afraid that things are not exactly as they seem for you and Kasumi, Naruto. Because of your father. He wasn't what most of the village was led to believe. Hiruzen replied with a bit of embarrassment. That raised a number of concerns in the minds of the three of them as they leaned forward in their chairs to give the man even more of their undivided attention. As he smoked his pipe, they all looked at Hiruzen with embarrassment. "Oh, do calm down, it's nothing bad." "Well, not really anyway. Politically it's a bit tricky, but then again, when isn't that just the normal status quo for you three? You don't need to worry. Like I said, it's not bad. It's just that, well, your father didn't even learn of this until he was a young man. You see, he wasn't exactly the clanless orphan genius that rose to prominence like the propaganda liked to portray him as. Don't get me wrong, it was excellent for the morale of the troops in the Third War. One of the common folk rising up to such a position. An orphan, no less. However, it did a disservice to both him, you, and your father's ancestors. Hiruzen elaborated. Sir, you are really pushing it with all the suspense building. What are you talking about? Said Naruto, who usually respected Hiruzen more than anybody else. I'm saying that your father's true lineage is that of our village's founder. He is the great-grandson of Hashirama Senju himself, making you the first Hokage's great-great-grandchildren as well. Hiruzen elaborated. Naruto's mouth moved silently in and out for a short time as he tried to process the knowledge. His intellect quickly admitted that, yes, his father was definitely a Senju, but the repercussions of that were still weighing heavily on him, and he seemed to be on the verge of short-circuiting. Will it turn out badly? Would anything happen? The notion that the normal Minato Namikes would advance through the ranks and play alongside the gods of shinobi was somewhat of a cliché in the academy. Propaganda was an essential part of the system that had been supplying the village with soldiers for several decades since Minato was named Hokage. Wait, so did Dad only become Hokage because he was Kasumi began to ask. No. Your father worked hard to reach the rank of a Kage. He earned it. He didn't even know of his heritage until he was already in office anyway. And his heritage had no sway in your decision, remarked Anko in a remarkably composed tone. No. Well, not to the final selection anyway. The short list was effectively my 3 students, Fugaku Uchiha and Minato. Of my students, Tsunade had just decided to go on her self-imposed exile. Jiraiya was, well, you know Jiraiya. Orochimaru was tainted by the worst parts of our world, and as much as I couldn't bring myself to stop him when I should have, I wasn't about to appoint him to Hokage. Hiruzen elaborated. What about Fugaku? Naruto asked, his brows furrowing. Before going back to the topic at hand, Hiruzen said, Fugaku might have been an incredibly skilled and powerful shinobi in his generation, but he was unpopular with the majority of our shinobi corps and even more so with the civilians, plus I personally had some issues with Fugaku. In a few days, it will come out in a minor news bulletin that the true heritage of your father has been found. We're covering up the truth with a minor alteration of the story so that we can still keep the image of your father achieving his goal as a common citizen of Konoha. It's too valuable to our recruitment of shinobi to throw away. Hiruzen went on. But why do any of that at all? Why not just bury the fact that we are Senju blood and move on? It changes too little and risks too much, right? Kasumi looked bewildered. Naruto said, taking a close look at the elderly commander, it would, but something has happened, hasn't it? Something wonderful, actually. You've taken a team of genin under your wing. I never doubted them for a moment, Hiruzen stated with a sly smile at Kasumi. The 3 blinked in confusion again. Not that specifically, I suppose. But rather what that will help prepare you for. Something I also will be working closely with you over the next couple of years to prepare you for. Just as I did your father. Hiruzen continued. What? Kasumi asked. Wait, you really mean it? Naruto said, swallowing a knot in his throat. Anko touched his shoulder firmly after realizing what was going on. When Kasumi realized Hiruzen's plan, she cried out, seriously, what do you mean, oh shit? Without even glancing in her direction, Naruto instantly spit out, Kasumi, language, while keeping his eyes on his leaders. The 3 members of the Uzumaki household were informed by the Hokage that the situation was grave. The announcement about Minato and thereby your heritage will be revealed soon. It will have some fallout, but I will handle most of it. If anyone asks you 3, you only learned when I discovered it, and as far as you know, Minato never knew at all. With similar gravity, Naruto replied, We understand, Lord Hokage. Good. Then we can move on to a slightly more awkward topic, one that was brought to my attention recently by my old teammates. Your clan has nearly been wiped out on 4 different occasions now. Technically more if we include your father's newly revealed heritage. I feel that you understand roughly where I am going from here, correct? Anko and Naruto exchanged a tight glance. But the prospect of attempting to bring the tribe back to life thrilled them both. On the other hand, the thought slightly twisted Kasumi's face. I don't want to rain on your parade, but I have to explain some additional details that apply to your situation, Naruto. Something that your father and mother had worked to set up for you but never got an opportunity to complete. Sadly, I believe they procrastinated on it as they thought they had all the time in the world to set things up. At that moment, Anko cursed, "Shit." Naruto and Kasumi looked at her, but Hiruzen simply continued before Anko could try to explain what she had just learned Naruto was being put into. You will encourage both financially and through other means to take in multiple women as mothers of your future children. It's imperative that they are close to your age, at least of the rank of genin, and in good standing with the village, but most of all someone you can trust completely with the interests of your clan. As rare as this situation is, the most common solution is typically to begin with those closest to yourself. Especially members of your clan. Naruto said, Kasumi, without warning. Kasumi took her brother's hand as Sarutobi began to say, "We aren't about to force her and you to couple, but we strongly encourage it for the good of the village and the future of your clan." Sarutobi sighed at how easy that portion of the conversation was becoming, while Anko was content to give the girl a knowing look and a flat glare without doing anything more to stop the behavior. She blushed brightly and responded, "We have to. For the clan, Naruto." Sarutobi said, "Well, obviously you 3 have things to discuss. I'll take my leave. When you have figured things out between yourselves, though, I will say I need you to look into this file. Consider it a specialized mission for the fledgling Uzumaki clan. One that will help both the village and yourselves to complete it should you take it up." Naruto began asking Kasumi what she thought, but the blonde simply refused to answer and attempted to play it off as though it were her duty, while also making it clear that she had thought about the situation with her brother beforehand. Anko simply could not handle the pleasure of watching the 2 siblings. She even believed that accepting the entire concept would be simple for her. Wouldn't change the dynamics in the house all that much. They already had very little privacy within the boundaries of the Uzumaki home. As she studied the paperwork and intelligence for the mission in the mission folder the Hokage had given them to evaluate, Anko's humor dried up into real amazement. The folder listed 2 of the village's kunoichi as the objectives of the expedition. With a snarl, Anko looked at the assignment type, "Dirty old man." Anko started to say, "Seduction. This is stupid." That perv Jiraiya definitely had some kind of part in as she turned to face the other 2 housemates, but she stopped in the midst. "Kasumi, you do realize that you don't actually have to do any of this, right? I don't care what they say. Even if I do have to find another couple of women to have kids with, I plan on only marrying Anko, and even then I wouldn't want you to give up the chance to figure out who you want to be with." Naruto never stopped thinking about her. The blonde shook her head, unable to speak edgewise. It was a little different from how they typically interact. She decided to take matters into her own hands after becoming impatient with her older brother's incessant chatter and pushing forward to give him a stern kiss, cutting short his brief scolding. It was much better than she had expected, she had to admit. Even though it wasn't the perfect romantic melding of lips that she had envisioned, she knew in that one moment that she was set on this path when she felt the warm, soft flesh of Naruto's lips alone send a spark of pleasure through her entire body. As the 2 continued kissing, Anko simply groaned in exasperation. This entire clan thing was going to get complicated in some really interesting ways. As she watched the two Uzumaki exchange their first awkward kiss, a progressively growing smirk developed on her face, indicating that she was definitely on board. The fact that she and Kasumi were supposed to help Naruto court his other two students and eventually recruit them into the clan may have worried her. A performance was about to start. After all, Kasumi required some guidance in order to win over someone else.